Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Tuesday, about 6 a.m. It is the day before KO Coliseum launches. That's pretty hype. And yeah, I been doing a lot of interviews. That's been a lot of my work this week. They keep throwing more at me too. It's like, I had 5 on my thing, and then they threw another one on me for today at lunch. So a lot of interviews and one-on-ones, and I don't know, not a very productive week. But yeah. Other than that, I think on the TFT side of things, I know the team prepped their A patch. Those notes will probably come out later today. As always with an A patch, you have to be relatively conservative, because if you A patch a file, you can't B patch a file. So you got to be a little risk averse. But overall, I saw they were, buffing a couple things, nerfing a couple things, fixing a couple bugs. So yeah, and crazy enough, the set will be live. Let's see, like I said, it's 6 a.m. right now. So in about 8 hours, it'll be live in OCE. So that'll be pretty cool. And like I said, this one in particular with EWC feels pretty weird, with everyone kind of like hiding tech and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think that'll be cool. So yeah, otherwise, not much else to say yet. Yeah. All right, let's jump right into questions. I'll jump right into it. Now that Cyber City is over, how was 4 augments, and do you think that's something that could ever return? So that's a big truck. Okay. So I think 4 augments actually was a massive success. I think it added a nice spice to the game, and was honestly one of the best things to come out of set 14. So I think that was a good thing. But there's an asterisk. There's an asterisk here. Sorry, there's just a big truck. I'm waiting for it to go by. Okay. I think every game having 4 augments is too much inflation and not something I would want in TFT, right? Like, so every single game having 4 augments, probably bad. I think using the 4 augment slots, God, using the 4 augment slots to do creative things, I think is where the big wins have been so far. So what I mean by that is, for example, the 1 versus 2 augment, like I've talked about before, I think that was a massive success and created some really interesting decision-making axes that we had never explored before. And that was awesome. I think the way it's being used for the Destiny augments in set 15 is also a good use of that tech. I think that's pretty cool. I do think if we wanted to add an encounter that was like 4th augments occasionally, I actually think that'd be totally fine. But you have to be really, really careful, because if you look at a triple prismatic game right now, I think that's probably the most inflation we have in a game. And whatever the set mechanic is, right? Like, so if we had a set mechanic that was inflationary, I would want to stay away from 4 augments. I don't know. Right now, the thing is, we have to keep our game very far away from Chonk's Treasure. We don't need to become Chonk's Treasure all the time. And the more we inflate the game, the more that becomes true. And a 4th augment is naturally inflation. So that's where I'm sort of like, and the other thing I'll say is that a 4th augment also loses its novelty the more you do it. I think 14 struck the nice balance where it wasn't every game. If it had been every game, I actually think it would have done permanent damage to the perception of the augment system. So I'm really glad we didn't do it every single game. So that, to me, was a big win. Trying trying to explain how I feel. So, you know the analogy where it's like if you have too much candy every day, the candy stops being sweet. God, I sound like a boomer when I say it like that. Anyway, that's what I feel like it would be with 4 augments. It would be like there's just so many augments all the time. You're seeing everything, that augments would become a little less special. So I definitely wouldn't want to do 4 augments all the time. But again, if you told me in 5% of games a 4th augment could appear, I think that's a great use of that tech. Now, obviously, and this is something we had to do for the Cyber City, so the tech's already there. But, you know, like, for example, if you were doing a 4th augment game, you couldn't have the Destiny augments because then you'd lose the slot. And so there'd have to be some setup like that. But we were already doing that. Like, anytime it was a 4 augment game, we couldn't do the 1v2 augment thing. So, you know. Yeah, the 1v2 augments to me is actually more than the 4th augment, is the thing I'd love to reserve. But, because I don't know if it stood alone as it's, yeah, I don't know. I like augments. I think a 4th augment is good. I think if you look at Cyber City as a whole, the augments were one of the big positives of that set. And yeah, so I got nothing against it. Now, again, like we said before, though, do we want to keep everything from every set and keep stacking on? Probably not. Probably not. So let's give 4th augment a break for a while, see how that plays out. And then if we find ourselves going, man, I sure wish that was around, or we need more encounters or something like that, then maybe that would make sense. But yeah, so there you go. I like I said, pretty positive on 4th augments. Don't necessarily need all the time. Think it did good things for the game. Don't want to inflate too much. Yeah. All right. So earlier in one of my walk the dogs, I had said I think power-ups might be a little too impactful. And so someone asked a follow-up question. They said, if power-ups are given to everyone equally at the same time, why is it a bad thing that they're impactful? This is a great question. And again, bad here can be pretty subjective, right? We don't have any analytics or KPIs that explicitly will say how impactful a set mechanic can affect, things like that. But there is going to be the opinion around how it all operates. So allow me to explain. In TFT, the game is made up of a ton of decisions, right? Your augment choices, what champions you play, what items you build, what power-ups you select, etc., etc. All of those decisions need to have a pretty equal weighting. Not like equal relative to each other, but like no single decision should be that impactful as to make the other decisions not important. Probably the worst example of this was the first time we did hero augments in set 8. Because every game you would get one hero augment, and everyone would get one. But what hero augment you chose could literally decide your placements. If you picked the wrong hero augment, that would massively swing the impact you have, okay? And I know some of you are thinking, well, like, isn't that true for augments? It's like, no, a lot of augments, the difference between a bad and a good selection isn't that severe. Now, insert a challenger player going, what are you talking about? That's a 0.5 swing. In the terms of this context, that is not big, right? Whereas a hero augment was like, could be a 2 placement swing. Okay, let's not be hyperbolic here. That is what I mean by impact. Any given decision can change the outcome of the game a little too much. So, the problem I have right now with power-ups is that there are certain power-ups that feel that impactful. There are power-ups that's like, oh, you chose this one? You fool. There are some good staples that I think are safe. And if the game was full of those, it'd be fine. The ones that are like, hey, now they shred and sunder and do bonus damage to enemies who are shredded and sundered. Problem is, those are all boring. Like, yeah, we can safely balance and make power-ups all low impact. That's easy. But it's the crazy ones that can be pretty impactful. Like the Jin one where every fourth shot bounces. That makes that champion go from D tier to low A tier. That's very impactful. The Syndra one where every time she casts, she gains stacking orbs. Like, some of these are borderline hero augments, and that level of impact feels like it might be a bit too much. And so because it's not uniform, your point was, if it's uniform, is it really that impactful? And so my retort here is that it's actually not that uniform, right? If you choose a champion that doesn't happen to have a special unique output, or you choose a champion and don't get one of the like really high potential outputs, like say hat trick pre-nerf, that can decide the game right there. Back when hat trick was 1 or 2% per hat, how are you supposed to beat a 50 plus hat champion? You can't, and that is why I sort of theorized here that the impact that was being had, even though it was uniform, was a bit too much. Now, again, some of these have been balanced to some extent. Hat trick as the example here is now clearly starting to get closer to what I would expect the bounds to be of a power-up. And it's a fine line here. It's a fine line because if everything is too similar and it's not impactful, you could make the argument your choice doesn't matter, right? And this is where I think the way we succeed on this is we have comparable axes on non-comparable outputs, which is a fancy way of saying sometimes you pick a combat one, sometimes you pick a utility one, and sometimes you pick a gold generating one, or a resource generating one, or sometimes you pick one that starts weak and scales, right? Like having all of those outputs that like can vary mean they're not equal, and your decision making comes with which way you chose to engage in that system. The games where you get the Midas touch and farm a little extra gold are fun. Just like augments. I mean, hilariously enough, a power-up really is just a centralized augment. And it kind of goes back to the question of, well, why can't we have a fourth augment? Well, because right now power-ups are essentially a fourth and fifth augment that are narrowed down to a specific output tied to a champion, if you want to abstract it at the highest level. So I think that's kind of why. And like I said, if that augment choice, the power-up choice, matters 5x more than the augment choices, that's where I think it can do harm to the game. Now, does that actually work out that way? We'll see. Maybe it's totally fine right now. Maybe it's actually the power-ups are, obviously there's going to be some that are better than others, but it's like, as long as you have one, you'll be fine. And it's not a problem. But I think the scary version is when there are about 10% of the power-ups that feel like they just propel champions up a placement or two. So that'd be kind of my thought. Yeah. So that's kind of why I think power-ups could be too impactful. Now again, we'll wait and see in practice. The game literally goes live in 24 hours or less, depending on your region. So we'll get to see. All right. This next question's a hard one. I don't like talking about this one, but whatever, it's fine. Game design inspiration versus casual enjoyment. And so basically the person asking this question was sort of like, hey, how often do you get inspiration from other games? And then when you're playing other games, is it easy to just sort of casually enjoy them? Or does it always feel like you're doing work research and constantly looking for ways to improve your work? What is it like as a game developer? The answer to this question is going to be different person to person. Every game developer is going to have a different relationship with their work, and they're going to have a different relationship with the games they play. I would say most game developers are actually pretty good about drawing a boundary between the two. And just because you're working on a MOBA doesn't mean you can't go off and play a horse girl racing sim game, gacha game, and have fun, you know. And those can be totally separate, and you can just casually enjoy your horse girls while working on your MOBA, you know, totally fine. Sadly, in this case, I'm not most people. My relationship with work and game development is a little less boundary defined. For me, I have a belief that to truly be a great game designer, you need to be familiar with all genres of games, because most of the innovations in the game industry in the last 15, 20 years have been mixing genres and systems of various games to success. And if you're not familiar with all of the different possibilities out there, you may miss a potential opportunity to make something new, where you see things that work really well together. In addition, there are so many video games out there that if you have a problem, chances are another game out there ran into a similar problem and had a solution that worked, or maybe even better, a solution that didn't work with evidence to prove it didn't work. And so the more you know about the industry, the better a game designer you can be. Now, someone out there is going, oh, sweet, so that just means you get to play games all day. No, and that's the problem. When you're playing games, you're not really enjoying the games. You are really trying to break down how their systems work from a purely mathematical standpoint so that you can understand them, understand their pros and cons. And it can feel like work. In my case, my brain's sort of hardwired to always be thinking like this. So it's just sort of natural for me. But like, to give you an example, when I'm playing Donkey Kong, the first thing I'm doing in the world is sort of going, okay, so how's this pattern work? Okay, every level has X fossils, which they hide in this way. A certain percentage of them are obvious, a certain percentage of them are low. They have these single door challenges, they have these triple door challenges, and those, there's a banana that's at the beginning and at the end, and then they hide one in the middle, so that pattern is consistent. And then the way they build the level is they have a world that's core and can't be deleted, surrounded by dirt that anyone can delete. And then to fill in the void of the dirt, they blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Like, all I'm trying to do is actually understand how it's all put together so that if ever, let's say someone was like, hey, we want to make a Timo digging game, but we don't know how to fill up the world, I can be like, well, the way DK did it was this, you know, and present a solution that could help the Timo digging game. No, that's not a real thing. And that's a lot of what game design is it's referencing solutions out there that have existed and been done well or not done well, and how they work, et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of the reasons why, like, a lot of game devs don't understand this, and it's something I've been preaching a lot more lately to try to drive the point home. The hardest part about making a video game is finding a unique, fun core that doesn't exist. Once you have that, making the content is actually the easy part, right? It's like, let's say you have again, let's go with this Timo digging game. Let's say we've made a Timo digging game, and playing Timo and digging is very fun. And everyone's like, oh my God, playing with Timo and digging is so much fun. From there, well, how do you ship a game? You build menus, you build levels, you build a health system, you build enemies, you build boss battles. That's all stuff that's been done. That's all stuff that's like, fill in the book, right? And so that's the easy part of game design. Tedious, sure, but easy. Because again, so many things out there have done it. It's like, what makes a good boss battle? There's 40 years of boss battle design that you can pull from, that if you're somehow still making bad bosses, you're just not doing your homework, you know? And so I've always told the story about how, like, when I was growing up, I would sit there and read strategy guides when I wasn't allowed to play video games. It's because reading strategy guides allowed me to understand their systems and their level design and stuff like that. And so for me, to go back to your original question, how much inspiration do you draw from other games? Lots. Because lots of other games have solved problems that need to be solved, you know? So whether it be like, hey, a spell shape from Disgaea, or a combat feel from Wukong, or whatever, you know, like, you can draw inspiration from lots of titles in the smallest ways. And sometimes it's titles people have never heard of. One of the other common things people will do is like, game becomes really big. We must draw inspiration from that very big game. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely things to learn from that big game, but if anything, some of the best inspirations out there are from mediocre B games with one really cool innovation. You know, so you can't just play all the best games either. So, yeah. To me, playing video games is always about, is there something new to learn? It's one of the reasons why when I'm picking video games to play, I'm looking for something that's a new experience. I don't think I can play another Slay the Spire copy, you know, because it's like, yep, that sure is a lot like Slay the Spire, with all the same systems, all the same pros and cons. But like, again, normal people are probably like, man, I love Slay the Spire. I'd love to play another Slay the Spire. I'm just like, nothing to learn. It's one of the reasons why I'm not particularly excited for Slay the Spire 2, even though I'm sure it'll be great. I guess it's Slay the Spire 2. It's going to be more Slay the Spire. I already learned everything I need to learn from Slay the Spire, which was a lot. It was a good game. Hades, same thing. I'm still waiting for Hades to do its 1.0 release of 2, and then I'll play it, but I'm definitely nervous. It's just going to be like, it sure is more Hades, you know, so. And is that a curse? Maybe. Yeah, so that's kind of how I play games, which again, definitely has made me enjoy them a little less, but I still have fun from time to time. Metaphor was a lot of fun. DK is pretty fun. So, yeah, there you go. All right, I got one more. I'm going to get through all of these. How does the team decide when to use custom abilities as opposed to a preset ability? So, hilariously enough, the history behind this is funny. Back all the way in set 4, I would say is the first time we truly deviated from a core League of Legends champion spell. And this was Ahri, who instead of doing her normal spells, we were going to do a Spirit Bomb. And to be upfront, 90% of the credit of this goes to Giovanni. Giovanni is the one who was pushing it. He definitely got some pushback from some people above him that were sort of like, you can't do this. And Giovanni was stubborn and went, no, I can. It'll work out fine. I admittedly was I did the middleman thing where I was kind of like, I can see it both ways. You know, had to present both sides as kind of that middle manager. Eventually I agreed to it. But again, Giovanni might tell the story differently. I know he definitely felt like he was being dogpiled on. But in the end, we ended up shipping it. And the logic here that ended up selling it was, as long as the core fantasy of the champion remains the same, you can explore other outputs that League might not normally do. Now, what does that mean? That means, you know, we've talked about this before, but like, although it's funny, as I say this out loud and use this example, I realize set 15 broke this, but maybe the skin makes it okay. Yeah. Here, I'll tell you what I was going to say. This was the framework beforehand. As long as you fulfill the core fantasy of the champion, it's fine. So what that means is Braum with the shield doesn't go around punching people and doing damage, or Ahri with her magic orb isn't doing melee attacks. You know, as long as Ahri is still a magical wizard with the orb, she's still Ari, and it's fine that she's doing a spirit bomb instead of, or if Vi was shooting fireballs, like that's probably not correct. Now, the reason I rolled my eyes is as I say that, it's like, oh wait, we have a Braum running around doing melee things, but at least he doesn't have his shield. And he's got that wrestler outfit, so it kind of thematically works with the skin. But that was our kind of philosophy. And so we tried it, and Ari ended up working out really well. And so now this is a tool we have in our toolbox. So from here, your question is sort of like, well, how do you decide to do it again in the future? Generally, you start with 5 costs, and 5 costs need to be something spectacular, something that has wow factor, it's exciting, and gets players going, I've never seen that before. Well, it's pretty hard to do that with the current abilities, right? Like, let's say someone said, gun to your head, Giovanni, you have to make a 5-cost misfortune. We're probably not doing her ult again, right? Because her ult is something that we've seen a bunch of times. There's not enough left on her kit that could be a 5-cost spell. So we might have to do something weird. And that would be a time where we go, ooh, what kind of custom ability could we do? And so 5 costs are a pretty common place for this. I know Set 9 Rise was this, because Set 9 Rise was sort of like, we need something. And Giovanni went a little nuts and said, what if 10 spells? But, the mechanical hook was pretty cool. Hi, bunny. Lots of tiny little bunnies. Beyond that, though, after 5 costs, the answer becomes if it's something really weird and unique. So I think KO Coliseum actually broke this rule quite a bit under the guise of everything needs to feel very thematic. So, for example, if you look at Karma was like, well, the base Karma spells don't really work as carry spells, but what if we take her like Q ult or whatever, the big ring, but let her move it sort of like legally distinct anime character move? And it's like, that could be cool, and that makes it tie in better to the thematics. The other thing I'll say is that as we've now hit like 6 years and 15 sets, is we're just running out of design space, right? Again, using Misfortune as the example, how many more Misfortunes can we print that are her either doing her ult, her bounce, or her rain? So we're going to have to push the bounds a little bit more. And so, but when we push those bounds, that is a higher implementation cost of making a new spell. That is a higher art cost. We might need to make things that go with it. The Ari Spirit Bomb required specific timing, specific animations she didn't have. Now, our team always gets really clever, and it's like, well, I just took this orb, and I scaled it up over time. You get clever. That's why I love game design. You design within constraints. But those costs have to be taken into account. And then the last thing is like, well, how many do you have, right? If an entire set is custom abilities, well, then it becomes sort of an unrecognizable mess. And it's like, well, what game is this? But if you've got a few champions that are like doing something weird and unique, that's cool. That's cool. So basically, it's a tool in our toolbox that when you're making your set, you can put on a couple champions and go, this is neat. This is unique. Gets you some novelty points, makes things stand out more. And it's a chance for designers to just be creative. If somebody really, really wants to make a Braum that's a wrestler out there fighting melee, all right, so be it, So now, again, are there maybe people around, higher up going, can't believe they made Braum a melee champion, those crazy sons of... Maybe. But at this point, TFT's also branded itself as sort of the push the bounds, wacky multiverses of the Runeterra. Multiverse of the Runeterra. So I think we can get away with a lot more nowadays, but there are still limits. So I don't think we're making a ranged Braum who's shooting fireballs. No design team. That is not a challenge. I swear to God, if I see a set proposal with a ranged Braum, I will find you. I will find you. So that's kind of what goes into it. All right, there you go. I got through 4 questions today. Like I said, just a lot of interviews and paperwork today. This week is weird. This week is a get through it week. We'll see the set launch. We'll see how that lands. And then next week is a dead week because, like I said, I'm in LA for some senior leader offsite thing. So minus 1 week. And then who knows after that? We'll see what happens after that. But yeah. One other fun thing, if you made it this far, I actually want to do a rant on the state of YouTube at some point. But the more I think about it, the more I'm just like diving into a topic that has no good outcome other than people getting mad. So I just want to say that if you're the type of person that watches this type of content on YouTube, good on you. Good on you, because there is just a lot of slop right now. And to be honest, there's AI slop, but then there's just human-made slop. And lately, every time I go to YouTube, I'm finding more and more human-made slop to the point where it's making YouTube start to become not as usable as it was 2 years ago. So pretty rough. But like I said, different talk for a different day. Let me know if you're interested in hearing that talk. But not really my expertise. I'm a game designer, not a YouTube guy. So, all right, that's going to do it for me. Hopefully you guys have a great day. Happy Tuesday. Good luck with the KO Coliseum launch. Hopefully Wednesday I wake up and things are great. So, all right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.